Good afternoon to you. It's 3:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour from Consumers Research, Will Hild joins us as President Trump banishes bigotry in federal agencies, hiring, and contracting. It's a huge deal today, reversing a very destructive 1965 executive order from Lyndon Johnson. Will Hild reacts to that today. 4 o'clock. A former attorney for President Trump, John Eastman, joins us. We will talk about this topic of birthright citizenship. What does the 14th Amendment to the Constitution say? And what does it mean for the future of the country? John weighs in. That's at 4:30. Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. You heard him this week at the inauguration. He'll talk to us about that prayer service at the National Cathedral yesterday where a priestess tried to ruin the whole thing. Lorenzo reacts, the good pastor. And then Luke Rosiak is here at 5 o'clock from the Daily Wire. We'll talk about Fairfax County, Virginia, and all the money they've been wasting there. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah. I won't spend too much time on it right now because Will's going to discuss it with us coming up this hour. But President Trump has signed an executive order this week overturning LBJ's so-called affirmative action executive order, which really did build systemic racism into our system, whereby people are judged on the basis of things like race and gender. And the president of the United States now, President Trump, reversing that this week. And placing all so-called DEI employees on leave effective 5 o'clock today. Everybody's got to be gone by 5 p.m. Wednesday. That is during this program. So over the course of the next 2 hours, a lot of cardboard boxes being packed up and carried out, assuming they were even showing up to the office in the first place. As the president has said, it's time for all of the DEI staff to go throughout the federal government. Also, that extends to federal contractors. There's going to be impacts on them. There's a lot going on here. Hiring, that's the big thing. And also pressure on corporate America to purge all of this racial bigotry from their ranks as well. So Will Hild will discuss coming up. It's really causing the left to be outraged today because just as it's always been throughout American history, they cling desperately to bigotry. It's their favorite sorting mechanism. But for the rest of us, no go. And President Trump delivering on that promise to move us closer to a colorblind meritocracy. And thank the good Lord. In fact, on that subject, there's a lot of headlines coming out right now. The president has ordered the Secretary of Transportation, that used to be Pete Buttigieg, thank goodness not anymore, and the FAA to immediately start hiring air traffic controllers based on merit rather than their skin color or their gender, which was insane. He says you can't pick an air traffic controller based on that. We have to return to, quote, non-discriminatory merit-based hiring. Wonderful. Very, very wonderful. And so we've got a lot of those stories coming out. But first, I want to go back to yesterday, where we had that Episcopal priestess, the Bishop Mariann Budde is her name. She ruined a national prayer event by engaging in a narcissistic attack on Trump and talking about how it's really going to stink that children can't be abused by the gender ideology anymore, the radical gender ideology. And also she was upset that she won't have enough illegals to clean her dishes. She's worried, where am I going to find the people who clean my dishes? She wondered out loud yesterday from the pulpit. Here she is, just as a reminder, scolding President Trump and J.D. Vance for trying to both protect kids and end a system of exploitation that she desperately wants to keep.
See upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
Let me pause on that for a moment. First of all, on this idea that you have gay people fearing for their lives, gay children are fearing for their lives, she declared. I want to refer you now to a letter that was just put out today and shared with the New York Post and Miranda Devine by Scott Bessent. He's the incoming Treasury Secretary, and he's an openly gay man. it turns out. Again, I mentioned yesterday, I didn't even realize this until his confirmation hearing. Oh, the guy's a gay guy. Who knew? It's not really a feature that we're looking for a Treasury Secretary. It just happens to be sort of a gratuitous detail generally. But here you have a letter from Scott Bessent today by way of the New York Post, and here's what he said. Mariann Budde, the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, chose selfishly to steal the spotlight and air her personal litany of political grievances at a joyous event, the traditional prayer service at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. After a morning of music and blessings, she chose to hijack the day. She was tasked with delivering a sermon to welcome in the second Trump administration. However, the bishop could not find the grace of character to restrain her inappropriate grandstanding. The service, conducted the day after the presidential inauguration, dates back to President Franklin Roosevelt's election in 1933. Bishop Budde began with a sermon of unity, in quotes, that quickly degenerated into division. She decried the, quote, outrage industrial complex, but she appeared on CNN just a few hours later to further politicize a traditionally religious event. Bishop Budde proved herself to be a narrow-minded, out-of-touch elite with little regard for facts. She regurgitated the tired trope of the fears of the LGBTQ plus and immigrant communities. On November 5th, President Trump received record support from gay and lesbian communities and shattered voting records with Hispanic voters. Her reductionist views were shocking, as she described illegal immigrants as those who pick our crops, clean our buildings, labor in our poultry farms. In fact, here is what he's referring to.
And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
So in other words, I need my servants, and I need to drive down American wages. I need a system of exploitation to enjoy the luxurious lifestyle that I continue to enjoy here in Washington, D.C. What a fraud this woman is in so many ways. Scott Bessent continued. He said, more importantly, the bishop showed no empathy to the American citizens who have seen their communities overrun, their children die from cross-border drugs, and their wages crushed by illegal immigration. She also chose to ignore that President Trump is devoid of prejudice when it comes to sexual preference. If confirmed as his Secretary of the Treasury, I will be the highest-ranking openly gay official in the history of the United States. As President Trump said in his inauguration speech, society will be merit-based. Does she believe God frowns on meritocracy? With senior representatives like Bishop Budde, it's not difficult to see why the Episcopal Church has lost members at a faster rate than any other denomination. Scott Bessent finishes this way. He says, the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church in America should publicly condemn her, usurping the day. Otherwise, the traditional prayer service should be moved from the National Cathedral. Whether Bishop Budde asks God for forgiveness, that's her business. But she owes President Trump and the American people an apology. Well, she sure does. She's not going to give one, by the way. She's been on a media tour bragging about how she owned Trump. She was able to stick it to the man, arguing for this insanity, this depraved insanity she stood up for yesterday. And moving it from the National Cathedral, don't you think that it might be time? You know, there are plenty of beautiful churches in Washington, D.C., that they might be able to move things to. If they wanted to move it close to the White House, they could do it right there at St. Matthew's Cathedral, not too far away. Beautiful cathedral right there in downtown Washington, D.C. You could move it to the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. That's right there at Catholic University. Gorgeous building. There are plenty of gigantic, beautiful cathedral spaces that can host the President of the United States and other dignitaries for a national prayer event. The White House should consider that going forward. Perfectly good opportunities there. I don't know why we would reward that woman with another opportunity to defile the altar. So there's Mariann Budde. And she went on CNN yesterday. Scott Bessent said that. And here's what she had to say as she was talking about how brave and wonderful she is.
I was looking at the president because I was speaking directly to him. I was also, frankly, as you do in every sermon, speaking to everyone who was listening through that one-on-one conversation with the president, reminding us all that in the people that are frightened in our country, the two groups of people that I mentioned are our fellow human beings, and that they have been portrayed in all throughout the political campaign in the harshest of lights that I wanted to counter as gently as I could with a reminder of their humanity and their place in our wider community.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So she's sticking with it, justifying her use of the pulpit for her own cruel political mission, which again doesn't represent any compassion in any meaningful way. Reverend Frank is calling line 2. Reverend Frank, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Your thoughts on this, sir?
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I just want to commend the Reverend. You know, it's tough to speak truth to power, but in the Bible, every king had a prophet who spoke truth to power, and the prophets were, you know, generally speaking about looking out for the least of these, the widows and the orphans. And so I just appreciated the
Reverend Frank, I would applaud that if she was speaking truth. She wasn't, though. She dressed up lies as truth. So yesterday, she gets up there on the pulpit and then justifies abuse by calling it compassion. How can you be for that?
Yeah, no, I just think she was really, you know, Jesus says, as you did unto the least of these, you did unto me. And so I think
Are you really a reverend? Are you really a reverend?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so why would you carry abuse forward as something that's good for kids? So why would you tell a child that they were born in the wrong body? Do you really do that?
No, I don't do that, but I know children who express different genders, and so people who are in power who are just telling them otherwise.
Hey, a Reverend, I would crack open the Bible that you are throwing at the rest of us right now and start with Genesis, because you are way off base here. The idea that you would justify this type of abuse and insanity, it's really too much. I'm worried about the state of your flock if you're a Reverend. The fact that she stands up there and then says that this is okay to do this to kids and then dresses it up as compassion, and then has the temerity to also say that these illegal immigrants who are in the country who she's exploiting for her own lifestyle, that what are we going to do when no one's here to wash my dishes? Don't you think that's crazy to say something like that?
I imagine she'll be the one who would be giving them sanctuary and giving them food rather than being the one trying to kick them out of the country. So that seems more insane and less Christ-like to try to kick them out of the country. I don't think she's really abusing that.
I'm going to pray for you. This is too much. Thank you, Reverend Frank. I'm not even sure why I'm thanking you, but okay, that's enough of that. It's too crazy. Rick is in Maryland, line 3. Rick, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, I am just horrified by that woman and this last caller. There are many good pastors out there. A real pastor would realize that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are a gift to America for years, and I have never run across people like this. I'm just horrified. I mean, they are so far off on the Bible. And good night. I think I need to preach harder.
Well, Rick, you can speak to this, but my impression has always been, because I think it's true, that the obligation of the church broadly is to make the world, make earth more like heaven, make more like eternity, not the other way around, to conform eternity to to very destructive pagan ideologies. It's grotesque what we're witnessing.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually going against the Bible, so how can they say that they are preachers or reverends? And they're going absolutely against the Bible. And, I've pastored 34 years, and I guess I've been in a bubble because I've been around people that believe the Bible, but they are just so far off. And I was grieved that as President Trump sat there, I mean, he should have started his day with somebody that loves him and is praying for him and his family and their protection. And instead, he had to get that. And there are plenty pastors that would love to have him and pray for him and his family. We do, we do. And I am so grieved and so hurt over that. that he
It's
had
amazing.
to sit there and listen to that with his family.
In my house, I never stop praying for Joe Biden. You just pray for him. You pray for him that he can be led towards wisdom. I mean, it's like, but it's so,
Right.
it's
Well,
so.
the Bible, right.
Yeah.
The Bible tells us to pray for those over us, and we pray for Joe Biden that he would, I mean, we don't mean him harm, but he certainly did us harm in a lot of ways. And but I'm glad to pray for President Trump and his family. He's on our prayer list at church, and his family. We pray for his family. We pray for Vice President Vance and Congress and all our leaders.
Yeah.
And I thank God for him, and I know our church does, and thousands, millions of Christians across America do.
Rick, thank you for that call. That was a nice palate cleanser over the last crazy one that we just. I'll spare you the audio, but that Bishop Mariann Budde, the priestess, she went on The View today to try and gather some more applause for attacking President Trump from the pulpit yesterday. Too much. Kevin's in Manassas, line 4. Kevin, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, the Bible says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 and 16, beware of the false prophets, teachers who come to you dressed as sheep, appearing gentle and innocent, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. That is by their contrived doctrine and self-focus. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? These people are wolves in sheep's clothing that teach these false doctrines in these churches, and there's no mystery why the Episcopal Church has lost millions of members over the years, because they're not teaching the Bible.
Oh, man, I tell you what, that good book is full of wisdom. Thank you, Kevin, for reminding us of some of that. Let me get to Laura now in Haymarket, line 7. Laura, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. I just wanted to thank you for what you just did. Thanks for standing up for truth. Thank you for standing up for the Bible and His Word and the Gospel. And I just pray, I really pray that everybody that is hearing your voice, that they replicate your courage. Thank you for what you just did.
Well, that was really nice. Thank you. Well, look, this is just what I believe. I don't know if I amounted to courage, but I will say that I'm not for abusing kids, and I really detest the framework that the left has built up to justify it. It drives me absolutely crazy, and I know I'm not alone. You can see it all over the country. Thank God.
It's courage.
The tide is turning.
You.
Thank you, Laura, for that call. Really nice. Coming up, we're going to talk to Will Hild. He is with Consumers Research, as President Trump is now trying to purge bigotry from every level of the federal government and even from corporate America. We'll get into all of this ahead with Will moments away. Good afternoon to you. It's 3:37 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, John Eastman joins us, former attorney for President Trump. We'll discuss birthright citizenship, whether it's even constitutional. John will assess. Lorenzo Sewell, the pastor at 180 Church in Detroit, Michigan. You heard him this week at the inauguration. He'll join us today at 4:30. And then at 5 o'clock from the Daily Wire, Luke Rosiak is here with an update on Fairfax County schools and how they're wasting all your money. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The President of the United States wasting no time purging bigotry from the federal government and everything it touches, signing an executive order yesterday, quote, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity, leading to today all of the various federal agencies needing to shutter their DEI offices and place all that staff on leave by 5 p.m. this afternoon. That is just over an hour from now. For more on everything that's happening right now and what it means for the country, I want to bring in Will Hild. He's the executive director of Consumers Research, and he joins us on the phone. Will, good to talk to you, sir.
Great to be with you on a fantastic day.
It really is. President Trump today really, I think, set the tone yesterday, set the tone for much of his administration here by purging all of this racial and gender prejudice out of the government. Give us a sense of what happened.
Well, basically, he has been on a shock and awe bombing campaign against every nook and cranny of DEI and affirmative action and race and sex-based hiring and promotion within the federal government, and all of the DEI nonsense that the government was trying to force into corporations. Part of one of the wars we've been fighting is against BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, these big asset managers that have been pushing DEI at these corporations. But they've been aided and abetted by the Biden administration. The federal government was basically threatening corporations if they didn't do this kind of thing. And we could not have gotten a more 180 administration in the past 2 days. They are basically saying, not only are you going to stop doing DEI, not only are you going to stop pushing corporations to do DEI, but your job is now to hunt DEI out of every public nonprofit and public corporation. So we are going to be starting to enforce the civil rights laws against discrimination in hiring rather than ignoring them and pushing racial and sex-based discrimination. It is a fantastic day for America.
The president writes in this executive order, the federal government is charged with enforcing our civil rights laws. The purpose of this order is to ensure that it does so by ending illegal preferences and discrimination. It is the policy of the United States to protect the civil rights of all Americans and to promote individual initiative, excellence, and hard work. I therefore order all executive departments and agencies to terminate all discriminatory and illegal preferences, mandates, policies, programs, activities, guidance, regulations, enforcement actions, consent orders, and requirements. I further order all agencies to enforce our longstanding civil rights laws and to combat illegal private sector DEI preferences, mandates, policies, programs, and activities. Will, I know this is really your realm, talking about these private sector, especially publicly traded companies. The president's saying here that he wants to purge that bigotry from the private sector. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these corporations were engaging in illegal race and sex-based hiring and promotion schemes, often operated out of their DEI departments. And they were, instead of being punished by the federal government, which is supposed to prevent this type of discrimination, they were being aided and abetted, and in some cases threatened by the federal government if they didn't do this kind of nonsense. And so we are about to see, I believe, a sea change in corporate America. Some of it will be voluntary. A lot of corporations didn't want to be engaging in this kind of thing, but felt like they had to. A lot of them do, but are about to face a very different legal and regulatory environment. And so this is going to be a huge shift for corporate America.
Also here, under the subsection, encouraging the private sector to end illegal DEI discrimination and preferences, the president's order, I think this is amazing, asks all of the agencies to each, quote, identify up to 9 potential civil compliance investigations of publicly traded corporations, large nonprofit corporations or associations, foundations with assets of $500 million or more, state and local bar and medical associations, and institutions of higher education with endowments over $1 billion. So if I'm reading this correctly, Will Hild, the president's asking the various agencies of the federal government to each identify private institutions or nonprofits who are racially prejudiced and to present them for civil action.
You're 100% right. Make no mistake. This is a declaration of total war against the DEI industrial complex. Every nonprofit, every university, every medical system, every corporation in America is now put on notice. If they are engaging in race and sex-based discrimination in hiring and promotion, they are now a target of the Trump administration, and they should be, because they're breaking federal law, soup to nuts. And it is finally the reckoning that has been needed and necessary in this country so that people can have their civil rights enforced has finally come.
I mean, corporate America has pretended for some time that these laws don't exist. These civil rights laws don't exist. They straight up make claims that they are going to target their hiring based on skin color. And then the way that all of our institutions have acted is that, oh, that's totally okay. That's fine. It's not, Will. It's completely and flatly illegal, isn't it?
100%. It's in violation of the Civil Rights Act. It's in violation of a whole host of other individual regulations. And in addition, a lot of these industries are governed not just by the Department of Labor that governs anybody that hires somebody, but about specific, departments that cover their industry. So, for example, HHS, Health and Human Services, has a civil rights division. Health systems are not supposed to be discriminating. And yet, during the COVID pandemic, you had a health system in Boston saying that they were going to hand out medical treatment based on trying to repair, historical injustices. And so they were going to start engaging in racial profiling for triaging treatment in patients. I mean, that's insane. That's talking about sequencing medical care to people based on the color of their skin.
Yes.
That's the exact kind of thing. I think when people hear this, they think, well, is it worth all that? Do they really need to be targeting all these companies and organizations? 100% they do, because as you said, these companies were engaged in rank, race, and sex-based discrimination. They've been doing it blatantly, and it has to end. It has to be enforced.
Well, also, these companies have propagandized that racial prejudice and gender prejudice is appropriate. That's one of the things. So like a company like Disney, for instance, it infects all of the content that they create and target towards children, and they use that to create a framework by which they can do that within their own ranks.
Exactly. And what ends up happening in a lot of these corporations, one of the big reasons we've been fighting against it, is somebody who is selected to be at a company explicitly because their race or sex ends up focused solely on that and expanding that within a company because their whole role is dependent on that rather than serving the customer.
Right.
Anyone, any competent person of any race or sex, they don't need racial and sexual quotas to keep their job, so they don't worry about it. They focus on making good movies or drilling for oil or making good medicine, right? They don't worry about what sex they are, or what race they are, and what special handouts. If that's how you got the job, then you care very, very deeply for expanding and extending that. And that's what happens at these DEI departments. It's the only thing they focus on. It's just more of the same, more race and sex-based discrimination. And they are going to have to be chiseled out. It's going to be a long fight. I don't want to paint too picture of a triumphalism here. We've got a long way to go. But the Trump administration today has set down a marker. This is a top priority for them. And I am fully confident that with the help of the federal government and groups like Consumers Research, like us, who are going to continue this fight, and Robbie Starbuck, comrades in arms in this, in 4 years, we're going to be look back and have put this to bed the way the Jacobins were put to bed and the Soviets were put to bed. It will be in the dustbin of history.
Will Hild, will you and Consumers Research engage in shareholder activism around this issue? In other words, are you going to go to these meetings and make proposals to get these companies on the right track?
That's part of what we do, but we also run multi-million-dollar name and shame campaigns for companies that engage in rank, sex, and racial discrimination. I mean, we ran a multi-million-dollar ad campaign against American Express, or what we called Un-American Express, for example, who was holding anti-white racial bias trainings, claiming that capitalism was inherently racist and white supremacist. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to attack the financial services framework that supports all this, namely Larry Fink and BlackRock, the CEO of the world's largest asset management company. That infamous quote where he talks about forcing behaviors that many of your listeners have probably seen, he was talking about forcing race and sex-based quotas onto the boards of every company they're invested in. So we're going to continue to attack the whole scaffolding that supports this nonsense. Have
they backed off on any of that? I know that BlackRock and some of these big asset managers, they've tried to make ovations to the right now because you have had, I think, considerable success in calling attention to this deranged left-wing activism. Have they reversed course at all?
It appears so. They are slowly retrenching. In fact, they changed some of the guidance around how they would handle shareholder voting this year for the assets that they hold, and they took out the explicit race and sex-based quotas that they formerly supported. And if they put in some mealy-mouthed, vague language about generally supporting diversity. That's not good enough. They need to completely disavow what they were doing, but it is progress and sign that we were having an effect. And I'm sure that after they have seen these executive orders, they're going to be even more afraid to be engaging in this kind of un-American, illegal nonsense.
Yeah, and now these companies are going to have civil compliance investigations hanging over them if they continue to engage in this kind of bigotry. It's just an amazing thing, and what a difference an administration makes. Hey, Will Hild from Consumers Research, thank you, sir. Good to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Always. There he is. Will Hild with Consumers Research. Let's see here. Mark is calling in from Landover Hills on line 4. Mark, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, Mark.
Vince, great show, buddy. Great show.
Thank you.
Hey, man, I just had to call in and say this, Vince. What you were talking about a little while ago, buddy, the reason that Donald Trump is doing this, Vince, if you think about it, buddy, is you and I have talked about this before, but today it's been consummated. Man, by him doing what you were talking about, is the reason for it is that there's not anyone else in this country in the last 8 years who hasn't had their civil rights violated more than the president of our United States. And he's trying to make things right because he realizes what dire straits our country is in. And you know, Vince, yourself, that Donald has a lot of good people that really like him and want to save our country.
Well, you're right. You're right in so many ways, Mark. You know, there's no question President Trump is the single American citizen who has had the most power, money, and influence targeted at him over these past few years, designed to deprive him and, by extension, his voters of their civil rights. There's no question about that. That is true. And we've all watched him survive that, thrive in it, and American voters reward him with another term, especially because they saw it too. And he's not alone. You know, he's got an entire cabinet of people, or many of them at least, who've been on the receiving end of that very thing. I'm going to talk to John Eastman coming up at 4 o'clock. He's been targeted by these very actions. We look at people like Tulsi Gabbard, treated as a terrorist. Pete Hegseth, treated as an extremist. You look at Kash Patel to head the FBI, hauled in before the Justice Department in the January 6th committee. It is endless, the number of people who have had their civil liberties trampled who are now being given a chance to oversee these very agencies.
Look what they did to Joe DiVincenzo, Vince.
Yes.
It's a shame. And Joe was saying this with you or somebody the other day. Look at how they've done him. They have definitely violated his civil rights.
Yeah.
And, hey, you watch Mr. Trump. He will keep his head in all of it, and he's gonna make our country better and make it better for all of us, Vince. And hey, I'll get off here, buddy.
He's already doing it, Mark. I agree with you completely. Thank you for that call. All right, let's see here. I've got Ron calling in from Northwest D.C. on line 1. Ron, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. I'm a vet, Navy vet, and I'm wondering if the president is going to make sure that his VA accountability that he put in before he left is back in place, because I don't think it was there under Joe Biden. And also, I would like, maybe we could have some type of website where we can call in or maybe log in and say how we were treated, and or feedback, should I say,
by the VA,
such as the quality we get from the VA hospitals and so forth.
Yeah. So back in his first administration in 2017, they did pass a law, the VA Accountability Act, and they started firing thousands of employees from the VA. But then the courts got in the way, and the left got in the way, and they started reinstating employees back to the VA, ones who had been fired for being crappy. And they were paying out settlements to some of these former employees. So the left really got in the way. So that brings us to today. Apparently, Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas and Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois, they've got a new piece of legislation called Restore VA Accountability Act that they started working up recently. And this is meant to prevent the courts from interfering anymore, so that, yes, you can fire all the bad employees at the VA. So, Ron, it sounds like Congress is working on that very thing, and I hope that they can accelerate it, because, boy, the people who need to be taken care of are the ones who've already taken care of us, just like you, sir. I'm really grateful for your service, and I hope that we can get this thing cleaned up, because you deserve a working VA.
All right, thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Good to call our attention to that. We're living in a wild time, aren't we? It's like you can barely keep track of all of the millions of things that are happening at once, but here at WMAL, we try to make sense of the news with every single day. John Eastman will join us next. We'll talk about birthright citizenship and what that 14th Amendment really says. Crazy Mazie Hirono, she's getting it wrong.